Welcome back to the Buckmaster Show. There are lots of books about World War II and heroes, but a new book by Tucson writer Katherine Harris is not only about war and heroes, but about love, flying, and reconnection. The name of the book is Finding Francis, Love Letters from a Flight Lieutenant. It is the true story that centers on the romance, largely conducted by mail, between an 18-year-old Royal Air Force pilot by the name of Eric Hutchin and a 17-year-old Francis Mackenzie, who met Eric while he was training at Falcon Field in Mesa, Arizona, in 1942. Joining us now on the Buckmaster Show is author Katherine Harris, who was born and raised in England but has resided in Tucson since the early 80s. Kathy, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
How did this story percolate? What was the genesis of this project?
I always wondered about Frances and their love story, and several years ago she gave me the letters that she had saved for all those years, and I started reading them, and I didn't want to just put them in a box and put them away because I thought they were so beautiful, and I wanted his story to be told, and also thought it might be inspirational to other young men and women who go to war. So this is really a history story and a love story, and it's really a coming-of-age story of every young person who goes to war.
And Eric is, in effect, your uncle, right?
My uncle, my dad's brother.
So your dad's brother. And this was a generation of young people. Eric flew the Spitfire, the famous British Spitfires, the Typhoons. And I love this period of history, World War II buff, you might say, Kathy, because I just don't know where these young people, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, found the courage to do what they had to do.
They were amazing. When I read the letters, and I've read many, many books, I don't know how they did it. They just never knew. From one minute to the next, they would scramble, get in their fighters, and they never knew if they were coming back. And of course, all this was, America was not in the war for the first few years, and Roosevelt and Churchill got together and created a plan to bring these boys over here to train. And there were 6 British flying training schools in America, and Eric was stationed at Falcon Field in Mesa.
That period is a fascinating period for America. When the war broke out in Europe in September 1st, the Nazis invaded Poland. President Roosevelt went on the radio and gave pretty much a message of neutrality, but he knew war was coming. And President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, England's famous prime minister at the time, they did hatch this plan, didn't they, for the RAF pilots to come to America to train?
Yeah, it was pretty much done under the radar. They came across from England on liners to Canada, and then they traveled mostly in civilian clothes. Eric came on a train across America all the way, actually came through Tucson. I have a postcard in the book.
There's some great pictures of his journey across America on the train trip. I mean, the photos alone are worth checking out in the book, Finding Francis. Really good stuff. And so he made it to Arizona and went to train at Falcon Field in Mesa. By this time, the United States had, of course, entered the war. So this was in 1942. What were the circumstances of meeting Francis?
The Americans really welcomed the young pilots, and they opened a house in Phoenix for socializing, and young ladies would come and make tea for them and visit with them. And he actually met Frances at a dance, and he fell madly in love with her. He was, as I say in the book, in one of his letters, I fall more and more hopelessly in love with you every day.
And they met, and there's a great old picture here for those that know Phoenix at the West Westward Ho Hotel in Phoenix.
That was where
downtown
Eric,
landmark.
yeah,
that's where
he had his graduation.
And they went to went to dances there, and so how long did the relationship were they together in Mesa?
Not very long, just several weeks. They loved to dance together. Apparently, he was a wonderful dancer, and she still mentions that they loved to dance together.
And the Christmas that they spent was really a magical Christmas, the Christmas of 1942.
That was the first time he kissed her. He spent a couple of days at her parents' house, had dinner with her parents, and he remembered the time that he kissed her goodbye and wended his blissfully unhappy way back to the airport, as he said in one of his letters.
And then they boarded commercial airliners to fly back.
No, he came back on a train.
On the train.
Yeah, there wasn't really much in the way of flying into England, so he went back on a train to Canada, spent some time in Canada, and then on a liner back to England.
These letters are just so beautifully written, and even the handwriting is something that you just don't see today. Of course, everyone seems to communicate these days through texting and email, but these are really thought out letters. And he went on then to see a lot of combat, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He flew a lot of what they called sorties. He was in Spitfires, and then he flew an aeroplane called a Typhoon, which flew rockets. And according to a lot of the books I've read, and of course Eric's letters, the Typhoon was a big tank of a plane, but it fired rockets and was, towards the end of the war, was a very important weapon, apparently liberating Holland, which was what he was involved in. The Dutch had a terrible time of it during the war. And at the end of the book, I do have a poem written by a Dutch lady thanking these brave young airmen.
And it's the courage, again, that it took. It's incredible. The name of the book is Finding Francis, Love Letters from a Flight Lieutenant by Catherine Harris. Kathy lives here in Tucson. This project's been percolating for a long time, hasn't it, Kathy?
Yeah, about... It was going on for about 10 years, but finally, a year ago, I decided I really had to put my nose to the grindstone and get this book done. And even now, when I pick it up, I can't believe that I've done it and that it's mine. I'm very, very proud, and it's a tribute not only to my uncle, but to all the brave young soldiers, men and women, that go off to fight.
And were Eric and Francis ever married, Kathy?
Well, I'm not going to tell you. You'll have to read the book.
And the best way to obtain the book is how? Well,
in town you can get it at my little shop called This, That and the Other on Grant Road. It's also available at Mostly Books out on Speedway and on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
You came to this country in what year?
1967.
And you flew the cross-country with your dad, right?
No, I came across on what Daddy referred to as a Pan-American four-prop job because it was a four-propeller plane. But no, my dad did come out to visit quite a few times and absolutely loved it here.
And you got involved in the music industry?
Yeah, I came over here and started managing bands in Los Angeles for about 10 years. And then I went and lived in a teepee in Oregon for a little while and took a break. And then I came to Tucson. My best friend moved here, and I absolutely love Tucson, and I stayed. And I worked in the music business here a little bit too. Had a teenage nightclub on 4th Avenue called the Pink Cadillac. Worked with some local musicians. But then I retired and wrote my book.
And you did a very good job with it, and congratulations. Kathy Harris, our guest, the author of Finding Francis, Love Letters from a Flight Lieutenant. Again, congratulations. It's a very important book, a very important part of history that you have captured here, and the Tucson and Phoenix connection makes it very important as well. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you again for inviting me.